Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the First Steps in Exporting seminar. I'm Julie Lucarella, a Business Development Manager here with the Ontario Centres of Excellence. During this session on exporting, we'll be providing you, or Maggie will be providing you with information on key government programs, services, and resources available to new and potential exporters, and she will provide an overview of web resources, practical issues, primary market research, and export planning. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Maggie Weaver, who is the Secretariat with the Canadian Ontario Export Forum. Maggie has been providing business information to companies and organizations for many years, and since 2002 has been helping Canadian exporters through the Canadian Ontario Export Forum, an alliance of government agencies that provide support services for Ontario exporters. For the Canadian Ontario Export Forum partner agencies, Maggie creates and delivers informative workshops about exporting programs and resources to SMEs across Ontario. These workshops include First Steps in Exporting, International Market Research, and Introduction to Trade Compliance Issues for Exporters. She also wrote the Guide to Online Export Resources for the Ministry of Economic Development International Trade Branch in 2003 and has been updating it regularly since. The guide describes online resources on export finance, customs and logistics, regulations and standards, market information, marketing and distribution, and U.S. industries and organizations. Prior to her role with COEF, Maggie worked for the City of Toronto Economic Development Division in its TradeLink office. In her long career as a business information professional, she has worked in the chemical industry, the United Nations, and management consulting firms, as well as with SME clients. So let's welcome Maggie Weaver. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I'm used to doing this presentation across Ontario, but in a much more small environment. So I hope you can see me and hear me. The presentation comprises a number of websites, and you can access the actual handout that I'll be following along on the apps that you have. So you click on this particular presentation, you will see the material there. You can, there are live links on there obviously, or you can email me afterwards for it. So the way the First Steps in Exporting works is that I introduce you to the steps that you as new exporters would take before you talk to a trade advisor. My role is to provide information and to encourage you to use that information to build an export plan, which you then take to a trade advisor. So I'm at the information stage of the process, and actually this is it seems to be compressed very neatly into what is today an hour. But in fact, when you do this, there's going to be a big chunk of work in the middle that you have to do by yourself, which is called market research. And so what I've had to do there is introduce you to some starting places with respect to market research. But I'm afraid there's a big chunk that you have to do yourself. However, I am there to help. This is the bit that I get excited about, is the research part. So I'm always there for you to ask, what's the next step? Forgot what I was supposed to be doing. Can't remember why you said I had to do that. That's my job, to move you along that road. So first, a little bit about the Export Forum itself. It is 22 government agencies, give or take, depending on who we invited and who's not working on that area anymore. The 22 agencies provide a whole spectrum of programs. They all work in their own specific area, whether that's a geographic area, a sector. Some of them are federal. I deal with the regional offices of, for example, DFAT and Export Development Canada. Some of them are provincial agencies. Some of them are not-for-profits. A few of them are municipal agencies. They all have a role to play. The difficulty, of course, is that there are so many of them and so many programs. And in my role in outreach, I actually have a cheat sheet of 150 such programs. And I'm going to talk very quickly from now on so you see all of them. No, not at all. I'm going to introduce you to the most important ones, and just know that there are a ton more out there that are there to help. I'm going to introduce you to the important ones. That's me at the bottom of the screen. I'm the only employee of the Canada-Ontario Export Forum. Those are the cats that I'm herding. So I'm not from the government, and I'm here to help you. In order to make this more easily understood, we've aligned our services along a continuum. And on the left-hand side of the continuum are so on your left, on the left-hand side of the continuum are the information pieces that I'm going to be talking about. And as we move across the continuum and you become more expert at exporting, more experienced in the workplace, more used to dealing with government agencies, you will find yourself talking to trade advisors in those other areas. So you'll perhaps take a formal course. You will then go and consult with a trade advisor. They will help you get into the market through some form of trade show. Like here, it would, instead of being a Made in Eastern Ontario booth, it would be a Made in Canada booth. And instead of being in Toronto, it would be in Frankfurt or Tokyo. And then we have on the right-hand end, on the right-hand end of the page, we have some programs that support existing exporters in terms of finance and that sort of thing. I'm not going to get that far. I'm only going to get that first big blob and possibly into the next two a little bit today. This is very definitely first steps. So that's where I'm from and what I'm supposed to be doing. And we're just going to talk about the first step. The first step, which is read a guide. This is the read the recipe that my mother always said you had to do before you cooked anything, just to make sure you have all the ingredients, you have the right pans, the oven is turned on today, and doesn't have to freeze for 3 weeks before you actually cook it. So the idea here is to read the whole process. On the screen we have a print example, which is kind of rare for us. Most of the material is electronic. This is sorry, first joke coming up. This is in print because the PDF has gone missing. But fortunately, there are a ton of these guides, both down here beside Julie, and also on the Ontario booth. So I encourage you to pick one up. But really, it doesn't matter which guide you read. There are just some here. The Ministry of Economic Development, Trade and Employment has an international trade branch, which is the main agency at the provincial level responsible for exporting. It has a very neat website, ontarioexports.com. So however many times the provincial government changes the name of the agency or changes the way the databases or websites are described, ontarioexports.com has been around a very long time, and God willing it will stay around a long time too. So this guide is just one of the many. The next one is a similar guide from DFAT, which is the main federal agency involved in exporting. Now, DFAT is actually two government agencies with two websites and two cabinet ministers. There's the international trade affairs part, and the website for that is international.gc.ca. And then there's the trade part, which is Minister Ed Fast, and that website is tradecommissioner.gc.ca. So most of the material from the federal side, from the DFAT side, is on the Trade Commissioner website. This website, I hope there's nobody from the federal government listening, this website, this particular guide is very similar to the one from the ministry, but it's written in Ottawa language rather than Toronto language. So those of you understand that, exactly what I mean when I say that. Right, so that's a second guide, very similar in notion. The third one that I have here introduces yet another agency. This is a Federal Crown Corporation, Export Development Canada. Nice, easy website, edc.ca. Export Development Canada is not likely to be an agency that you meet as a new exporter, because mainly its role is at the financing end, which means that you've already made a sale and you're looking to finance or underwrite the building up of your inventory or insure your receivables. So it's not an agency that really steps in at the very early stages. However, they have on their website under Knowledge Center a ton of useful information. And this particular guide, called the Introduction to Exporting, is written from a banker's viewpoint. So it has sections on how to get paid, which is how to sell, something a little more business-like, a little more, business-like, that's right, sort of more on a wavelength with the way businesses operate. But I tell you, they're all very similar. They all cover the same kind of material. The style is just a little bit different. The last one that I give you in this section, and there are many more, is one that is focused to a very special market. And I chose it because I think it's one of the markets that the people at this environment in the discovery area here will be involved in. And that's a website called Sell to the US Government. Sell to the digit 2 usgov.ca. It's a website that was built by the federal government to help Canadian companies cope with the issue that arose when the Americans decided that they were going to have Buy American rules. And this affects small businesses in Canada because it was intended, these rules at both the US federal and the US state level, were intended to help protect that big customer from people like us. They wanted the business that the US governments were going to pay for to go to local American companies. And the Canadian government has made an agreement with the US that allows the Canadian small businesses to compete in that US market, despite the protections that have been put in there. Thank goodness for that. This particular guide is very much structured to a single purchaser, and that is US government. It has also got sections on state government and how state and municipal governments buy. And it also has guides on how to get yourself onto the procurement list for those companies. So we're not just talking technology here, but it's an important one, obviously, in the technology area. One of the customers that I've met has sold a ton of snow fences to the US Parks Department. A snow fence is not terribly has no technology content, frankly, except for the fact that the snow actually piles up behind it, which to me is a complete mystery. But it is just a stick with a bit of wire around it, right? But I can tell you, if you're selling snow fences to the Parks Department, that's a big sale. And so it's important to be able to do that. So there are other government guides like this that introduce you both to the general process of exporting, to very specific markets, and in some cases to geographic markets. So we have guides to doing business in Brazil, guides to doing business in the US. I can't list them all. Just to get you an idea, read at least one of them. The next step is a couple of very specific things which relate to the mechanics of moving stuff across the border. And the first one I'm going to introduce, they're both from Canada Border Services, whose role is to enforce, if you like, the regulations as they apply across the border. Canada Border Services is one of the partner agencies in the Canada-Ontario Export Forum. The first aspect is something you do right at the beginning of your export process, and the second one is something you do right at the end of the export process, but I put them here together because they are things that you just, once you know you have to do them, you do them. The very first thing is the import-export account number on your business number. You have a business number 1234567 RT001, right? And that identifies your company uniquely to Revenue Canada in the same way that your SIN number identifies you personally uniquely to Revenue Canada. When you go across the border, Canada Borders, in either direction, Canada Border Services also needs to be able to capture information about your company. So you need to have your business number, as we say, coded to an import-export account. And all that means is that you need the same business number as your existing one, But instead of having RT in the middle of it, you have a second copy which has RM in the middle of it, and you use that number on your Border Services documents. In that case, Border Services now knows that you are a unique company. This is important for one rather small thing, and that is the anxiety attack at tax time, which all small businesses understand and which is important to waylay. As you know, as a small business, you have to put your income tax returns in, and it shows your sales are going up and up and up. And you put your GST returns in, and that shows your GST returns should be tracking up and up and up at the same rate as your income, right? Because GST reflects income. However, typically on goods, we do not charge GST. So if you're exporting goods, your income will go up, and your GST won't go up quite the same way. And if Revenue Canada sees that, they get kind of antsy, and then you get this phone call. And one thing an SME does not want is a phone call from Revenue Canada saying, where's your GST return? Last time I did that, I said it was on my dining table, and he was very nice about it, but you know, you really do need to do this. If you have not got a business number already, then make sure you also apply. At the time you apply for your business number, ask for the import-export account. You get a number with an RT in it, you get the same number with RM. If you already have a business number, there's a document that you can use to get the change thing. The form that you use is form RC1 and C for change. RC1 is the form to get your business number, RC1C is the form to change your business number. In the handout, I give you the full link to that page, but you just put RC1C into the search box. And it's this point that I certainly realized that government departments have no sense of humor, because if that was called form R2D2, we would remember it and there would be no problem about it. But it's form RC1C, not R2D2. Sorry about that. I try. Okay, so that's the first thing. Get your business number coded to an import-export account before you get going. The second thing happens at the end of the process. You report your exports on a form B13A. Sorry about all this technology. B13A, you report it. It's just a statistical document. You do it for so that StatCan can keep track of the balance of trade. There's one simplification, which is an example of great piece of cooperation between the US and Canada. If you export to the US, you are not required to fill out the B13A. And the reason for that is that the documents that you complete as an exporter and the documents you complete as a US importer are almost identical. And to save you the paperwork, there's an agreement that if you're the exporting company, you just fill out the documents of the import country and they give the data back to the other side. So if you're exporting, you complete the US documents only. If you're importing, you complete the Canadian documents only. An amazing piece of collaboration there. So that's at the end of the process. So that's the two simple steps. Read the recipe and figure out the border services bit. The next part is your homework, and that is doing the market research. And at this point, because in the room I have 20 people, there's going to be 20 different products and at least 20 different countries involved. So it's not going to be easy to cover this. What I've tried to do is introduce you to some starter pieces. And then, since I like doing this part, I recommend that you note down my email address and ask me to help with the rest. Okay, so the first site here is the Trade Commissioner Service has on its website some sample reports. These are typically the market research reports that would be given to a Canadian company going to a trade show like this, but in a foreign country. So there would be a guide that says, what is the market for clean water technology in Western Europe, because you're in a Frankfurt show on that topic. So they're 15 pages or so long, and I recommend that you find one like this to give you an idea of the sort of information you're going to be collecting. We're not talking now about how many widgets will I sell if I go to Czechoslovakia. We're actually talking about what is it like to do business there. What will I need to know as a business person? Ontario also has some market reports like this. This is the ministry's new website, ontarioexports.com. That's actually a shortcut. When you get there, you realize it's got the standard Ontario government website address. But they have a section called Export Reports, and this one is on, sorry, bifocals don't work here, electronic media and broadcast technologies as a marketplace in the Netherlands. They must have been going to the Netherlands to do a study there. What's important for you, the first really, really important part about market research is not the companies and how you're going to sell them to them or anything like that. It's what are the regulations with respect to your products. And you nearly always have to go to the target country itself to find out what their import regulations are, the target country. So here we have what the US government document looks like. This is a stinky document. The US is very good about providing information free, but doesn't make much effort to make it accessible. So this is a 211-page document. This is the table of contents. It has no page numbers on it. There are no internal links from that. It is one single string of very boring text. But it is the official document, so you should know about it. Our colleagues in Japan are much friendlier about theirs. JETRO is the Japan External Trade Organization. Its job is to open the Japanese market. They are very fond of Canada. Their market reports, for example, are written in English and French, and their guides to imports are written in English in PDF form on their website. So the first one is a handbook for consumer products. The second one is the rules for industrial products. The third one is the rules for agricultural products, etc. And they're written in English. Another place that you can find the import regulations is right on the Trade Commissioner website. Our trade commissioners in the various consulates, embassies, and high commissions abroad are very good about identifying neat pieces of information about the country that they're serving, and they put this information up on the website. So this is the example from our Israel, our DFAT people in Israel have an English language explanation of the import regulations for Israel. And finally, you can always find a ton of information from the United States. The US State Department has a service called Country Commercial Guides. This is the landing page. It is a search box. The landing page allows you to choose a country, and then you choose Country Commercial Reports, and you hit Go. There's an option to choose Market Reports here, but Market Reports, they always demand a password for, and since you're not Americans, you don't get a password. So, but Country Commercial Guides is good. And the Country Commercial Guide, in this case I've chosen India, the Country Commercial Guide is intended for US exporters, but of course the factual information that they provide is very relevant to us. And usually it's the middle chapter, so in this case it's chapter 5, which is Trade Regulations, Customs and Standards. And that's factual information summarized for the US market. So US guides. So because this is intended for the US, there is no guide to the US, because there is no guide to Cuba, because officially they don't do business with Cuba. There is a guide to Canada, so if you want to know what the import regulations into Canada are, you go and ask the US, right, what they say, and there's a nice summary. This one is linked. These are PDF links, and the document, well, the Canadian one is about 500 pages long, so I guess we must have a lot of rules. Some of this material here is not appropriate for Canadians, so it's got travel instructions, and obviously the travel instructions between Canada and India will be different for the travel instructions between US and India. But the middle section is the same practical information. But please remember that even though you read this summary, it is a summary written by Americans, and you should go to the actual documents of the target country. Okay? So that's the regulations in the target country. Those are the ones that are going to make the big difference. We have a few regulations in Canada which apply, and those few regulations are easy to remember. The first one relates to food products. They are summarized in the Canada Business website. Canada Business Ontario has a booth over in that corner over there next to the Innovation Partners area. Their website, canadabusiness.ca, has terrific descriptions in plain language, English and French, of government programs and services. You don't have to know what level of government, whether it's a federal or provincial program. You don't have to know which ministry or department is involved. You just use the search box, which is very potent. And in this case, exporting regulations, I don't even need to specify that I'm in Ontario because export regulations are the same across Canada. So there's a summary there, and the very first line says, make sure you've got the right business number coded to an import-export account, which is why I'm glad I said that. And then it says, make sure that you know where the goods were made. If you are re-exporting goods that are not originally from Canada, then you may be required to use a different certificate of origin at the target end from what you think, because it's not really a Canadian product, and etc. But it's not terribly many regulations. If you're exporting nuclear reactors or weapons of mass destruction or something like that we make lots of, then you should worry. But in general, the only one that we make a lot of that is of concern is food, and I think most of you guys are not here in the food area, so I skipped that one. So food is one of the ones that does require a permit. In the next area, there's a group of products that are covered by export controls. Export controls is part of the DFAT thing, so the website is international.gc.ca. And within the export controls area, there are three kinds of exports that you need to worry about. The first, as I mentioned, is nuclear reactors, weapons of mass destruction, guns, handguns, ammunition, all those things that you really don't want to talk about. The second area is an area that is easy to remember, but a bit weird, and that is US technology. If we are re-exporting US technology, we require an export permit. And so, for example, if you are exporting a camera and the lens has come from the US, you may be required to have a permit for that lens. And the reason for that is that the US claims jurisdiction over its export controls regardless of which country is doing the actual exporting. So if a US product comes to Canada, is then sold on to the Netherlands, is then sold on to Iran or Pakistan or Myanmar, the US knows. We know the US knows, but the US knows and cares, and so we require an export permit if you are re-exporting US technology. If you're not sure, you can describe the product or send an example of it to export controls, and they will indicate what kind of export permit you need. So that one's an odd one, but it's easy to remember. The third area, which is difficult to figure out, and in fact takes half of the export controls handbook to explain, is what we call dual-use technology. And dual-use technology is technology that is being used for one purpose, but could be used for something else. And that something else is military. So for example, lab equipment. I'm selling lab equipment to a nice little school in, all right, where shall I sell my lab? Saudi Arabia. Let me sell my lab equipment to a school in Saudi Arabia. Now this lab equipment could be used to make other things like bombs, because it is after all lab equipment, right? So that is dual use and would require a permit. And similarly, encryption technology. So if we can, if you have a product or service that has encryption, and the encryption part can be unbundled and used for other things, then that would require a permit. In this case, our regulations are really not caught up with the way technology is moving ahead. So if you have anything that is in any way advanced, as we know, 3D printing can be used to make guns, so you would consider that that would be worth passing by through export controls to make sure that you know whether that's all right to do that. Okay, so really only 4 areas to worry about: food products, military products, American technology, and dual use technology. And all of those require a permit, and they require a permit on the actual shipment. So you don't get a permit that says, I'm making CANDU reactors and I'm selling them to Pakistan, give me a permit. They say, you have to say, I am shipping this piece of a reactor to Pakistan, I need a permit for this shipment. Right? So, but people do that all the time. We sell a lot of equipment like that to a lot of places for which we require permits. So it's just one of those things that some of you are in the technology area where this may apply. I have given you an example of a simple explanation of export controls that comes from a Canadian law firm. It's in the handout. It is actually from Borden Ladner Gervais LLP BGD, and they actually have written it as a frequently asked question, so it's a lot simpler to read than the legislation. So there are some other resources that you will need to know, and one of them is protecting your intellectual property in the foreign market. Now, many of you have products and services that can be patented. Some of you will already have a trademark that might need to be protected in the target country. You also need to make sure that your trademark, in fact, does not infringe somebody else in that target market. And Dumitru here is from the, wave your hand, he's from the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, and this is one of the programs that they have, and it supports exporters in protecting your intellectual property. So if you think you have a product like that that needs to be protected, he's your man. Okay. And at the bottom of the page, oh, sorry, you don't have the handout. Totally forgot that. If any of you in the associated with Mars program, they will actually do some of your market research for you. They have a program where they will support small businesses by actually doing the research with you. Don't let them do it for you, because as you do the market research, you will draw conclusions about your target country, how many widgets you'll sell, even whether it's the right place to go or the right product to take. But this is the Mars website. They're advertising us. On the right-hand side there, and right near the bottom, it says Market Intelligence Reports, and they will provide those for you for free. I mean, they pay for them, but they give them to you for free. They cover reports in IT, software, telecoms, biotech, clean tech, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare. At this point, I'm going to send you off into the big wide research world through a website which is from Michigan State University. It's called Global Edge. It's supported by the library there, and it in turn is used by the International Business Program at Michigan State. I've chosen it because, of course, when I'm steering people to websites, it's important that I know that they're robust, that they're stable websites, and that they work properly. And this one has been around since the beginnings of the internet, which means before you guys were born. And it certainly is a very stable program and will always be there. And that's where I like people to start. In some cases, too, we have actually a workshop called International Market Research, which is a 90-minute workshop, and I go into more depth in more of the areas that you might be interested in. So I'm going to be doing that in Whitby in May, in Brampton in June, in Ottawa in June, and in Agincourt in October. So if you're interested in international market research, I'm your person. Now you're going to write this all down into an export plan. And the reason for that is that when you go talk to a business advisor, they don't have a ton of time to work with you on this. They want it, it's not that they're not going to give you advice if you don't have the plan, it's that they can get to the point much more quickly. And the best place I found for doing this is the US Small Business Administration has this wonderful interactive business planner which you download. You can see it's a PDF that you complete yourself. And it's interesting because the top part, see section 1 is called information. That's just how to fill out this part of the business plan. But the lower part, which says worksheets, those are actually guides, tick off the boxes type things. Have I done that or not? So I find that you download the whole thing for free, and at that point you work on it at your own speed, and it's a checklist of things. A really useful program. And it's quite new. It's been up about a year. The handout gives some sample export plans that you might want to download so you can see what they look like. And as you go through your export plan, you will start to think about not just what does this market look like, but how will I get into it? Will I be using a partner? Will I be licensing my products and taking royalties? Will I be actually opening a subsidiary? And it's at that point that EDC, Export Development Canada, has a program called, or a publication called Export Strategies, which is how do I partner to get into that market? So again, it's one of the ones that you download from EDC's Knowledge Center. So at this point, we go back and we say, we are ready. We have written our plan. We know there are some gaps. The trade advisors will find some other gaps that you didn't know about, and this is one reason why you go and talk to them. I work in the left-hand end of this continuum. Notice at the bottom I have some bits about InPerson Support, other than me. I'm not the only person that's there to help you, obviously. And I'll just talk about those before I move on a bit. First of all, the Ministry of International Trade branch of Ministry of Economic Development, which is over there, actually puts its staff list online. I think that's the best thing. They are real people with real email addresses and real telephone numbers, not just triaged. DFAT also has its Toronto office online, but they give you a generic number and a generic email address. But more important are the small business centres. The small business centres are the walk-in centres all over Ontario that are supported by the ministry, and they're important. The one in Toronto is called Enterprise Toronto. They're important because sometimes your inquiry is not export, it's something else. I have an example of this. When I was working in Toronto's area, we had a guy who was selling beer in the US through he had a tanker, and he was taking the tanker across the border full, and it was coming back with flops in it, and he wanted to know why the code, the product code for the product going out was different from the product code for the product coming in. Well, it's a very simple question, actually, is that the answer is simple because goods returning to Canada have a different code. Otherwise, you'd be paying tax on them in both directions. So they have a different code. But what caught our eye was, he's bringing a tanker with just a little bit of beer in the bottom of it. What a waste of a journey. But you can't put anything else in a beer tanker without a lot of cleaning. So we went to find out, so it stopped being an export question and started to be a business question, moved over to the business side, and we discovered that though Daddy had bought him a brewery, nobody had thought, and he had bought himself a tanker, he didn't have a bottling line. So we helped to find an angel investor to buy him a bottling line. He's making a ton of money. He's not making a great deal of money exporting, although we helped him with the labels and all that sort of thing. The difference is there aren't too many bars in Toronto that want a tanker full of beer, but there are lots of bars in Toronto that will take bottles. So now he's selling a huge amount in Toronto, more than he ever was before. He's still selling in the US. I don't know what happened to the tanker. Now, normally, there's one guy in the audience at this point says, dream job, a tanker in a brewery. But for the rest of us, you know, we think, why didn't we think of that, right? So I want you to know that you should always report to your small business center, because there will be an angel investor somewhere there, or the centers of excellence. There will be somebody there who will help you with those other questions that arise because you're exporting, but they're not export questions. So now there's a small area with respect to skills development, which I don't think I'm going to cover very much, except one program called Exporting to the United States. And this is actually a field trip where 15 companies go across the border, they see the guy with the gun looks at their product, and then they talk to a business immigration guy, and they talk to somebody from the warehousing, and they talk to a tax advisor, etc. Very, very practical program. And Debbie over on the Ontario booth over there does these. Very practical export program just to the United States. And there are some formal programs from the Forum for International Trade Training. So if you see in a college or university a program on international business, it's the curriculum has almost certainly come from Forum for International Trade Training. And if you're hiring somebody to help you, a certified international trade professional who's done this program is the way to go. So now we move into the general area, and I've passed you on now to a trade advisor. I've helped you fill your suitcase with the right kind of information, and they're going to help you buy the ticket and get you on the train. So at this point, there's a ton of people helping you. All of the 22 agencies are involved in this area. And probably the easiest thing at this point is to talk to you just about a handful of programs that are in the next phases. After you have gone into production and are selling in Canada, then there are programs. This is a slight difference from the innovation programs. Innovation programs want to catch you before commercialization, and they're involved with money. Programs in exporting tend to want to capture you after you have started production or started making sales and are more involved in advice. But this first example is actually slightly not true for that. This is called the Export Market Access Fund, and it provides a 50% grant for marketing efforts such as going to a trade show like this. It would pay half of your booth, half of your travel, half of your hotel. If you need a translator, half of your translation. You do have to have an established business, but and there is at the moment a dollar limit on how much you should be selling already, but they are changing that because some of you people represent what we call born to export. Sounds rather cool to me, but born to export companies do not have to meet the financial requirements here. So that's a grant, a 50% grant. And I just want to show you some of the other programs. BDC, which is the Business Development Bank of Canada, has a program called Market Expansion Financing, which is used not just for expansion in internationally, but also in Canada. And they understand, BDC understands that in exporting it takes longer to build the inventory, longer to sell it, longer to get paid, so the repayment schedule is favoring long-term sales as opposed to short-term sales. And it's targeted for exporters. FedDev Ontario has a program called Investing in Innovation, in Business Innovation. I've missed a word out there. And that's a program that they talk about on their booth over there. It is supports what we call early stage businesses. So that's you guys. When you're thinking about commercialization into foreign markets right away. So that's a program that would be available to you guys. Foreign Affairs has, on its Trade Commissioner website, explains its, well, that's interesting. The picture didn't change, but the top changed. Ignore that one, won't tell you about that one. You may have heard of the International Science and Technology Partnership Program, ISTP, has its own website, which is nice. These are technology agreements that are done between certain countries and the feds, and this website also supports certain countries and the provinces with programs that are specifically in the science and technology area, and they are partnership as opposed to export sales. So you would be partnering with a foreign company or with a foreign university. And there are a number of programs that are very specific to sectors, usually done by the people in that sector. So I'm giving you an example here of one that is actually being talked about over at booth number 1530, and that is the Soft Landing program from the Canadian Digital Media Network. So they have a program which is targeting qualified startups, they say, to work from an accelerator or incubator in a new market, in a new foreign market. Okay? Very, very focused on that particular sector, done through the industry association, which is the CDMN. And so there are a number of programs like that that are very, very focused. So what I've gone through now is to say, first of all, read the recipe, whether it's this recipe To me, all brownies are the same. So whether it's this one or the one from Export Development Canada, the one from DFAT, remember about the Border Services business number. Do some research and engage me, and that's my email address. Write it all down in a business plan, and then go talk to somebody. And again, there's me that will tell you who's the person to talk to. So at that point, are there any questions? Are you totally pooped? I'm totally pooped. Well, I'm going to stand under the booth called Ontario over there. So if you would like to join me over there, or you would like to email me at cof.exports@gmail.com, I will be there. I am there for you. I am your point person when it comes to export. We have sorry, I won't step down just yet.
Actually, I'd like to ask you a question, Maggie. If I wanted to export, how much time should I give myself?
Aha, what a sneaky question.
Yeah.
How much time if I want to export? Well, some people are born to export. So if you're selling ice wine, which we all are, if you're selling ice wine, there's a ton of people helping you. There's lots of people who want to buy. The research has all been done. So a couple of weeks for ice wine. If it's a new product, for you, these are innovative products. You have to research that market. The cultures are different from you, and your idea is new, so you have to convince the guy at the other end to buy. I would say a year. I mean, if you think about selling into a Canadian market, it's not going to happen the day you graduate or the day that you open the doors. So into a foreign market, you should allow a lot more. But in some cases, we in Ontario particularly are very, very fortunate. We have partners in other countries, a lot of them, because we have family in other countries, a lot of them. So we have a lot of people who know how to do business in those countries. And so we are fortunate we can short circuit some of those parts to find markets, to find customers, to get used to doing business in that country. Many of us have families who will be buying our first products. If you can partner through a university, there's getting to know the university, but after that it's probably quick. But even then, getting to know the university, maybe a year to find the right person to work with them. So I would say there's your R&D cycle, there's your market research cycle, and then there's the market entry cycle. If you have a short R&D, you probably have a short time to market. If you have long R&D, because it's innovative, very innovative, then it's going to take longer to research the market. It's going to take longer to convince somebody to buy it. So I think it's proportional.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Maggie, very much. I thought that was a very interesting talk and a very good overview on how you enter the market.
Okay.
So I'd like to give this gift to you from OCE.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all as well for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.